In today's video, I'll be doing a bit more of a walkthrough with you and kind of showing you one of the projects that I will be making this summer for a for sale item. Something that I've seen around a few different people have been making, not quite locally, but I've seen them quite a bit on Pinterest and different types of other YouTube channels and videos. So I'll go through and kind of give you a step-by-step rendition of how I would approach making them. So we're going to be going through today and making a pallet shelf. So I have made a tall singular pallet shelf, but one of the main ones that people like to see is more of an art decorum style. So we're going to go through and it's going to have some varying heights to it, varying lengths of boards in a vertical pattern, and we'll be using the stringer bits, and we're going to be cutting down chunks and sections of it and making it look all nice and pretty, and then that will be the actual shelf bit. For the front part for candles, a lot of people use them for picture frames. Certain people who like more of a Western feel or approach to their house will also do this. So I'm going to go through and kind of make up a basic run-through version of it that's just blank, and I might make a couple of these. I'm going to be making them, like I said, for sale in my local area. So I'll make about 3 renditions probably here for the end result so that you guys can kind of see my approach to it, a couple of different methods to it, but I'm also going to have those 3 for sale at the end of the video once this is up. So we'll just kind of go through real quick, and the materials that you can use are the nails from the actual boards. You can use pin nails or you can use glue, so this isn't something that's super crazy. You can also just use screws along the way too. So we'll cover that, and without further ado, let's get to building. Alright, so we're going to want to go through just kind of a quick layout. The material is pretty much just a disassembled pallet. So we have our stringer pieces here. They'll have some knocks and notches and little nails that we can go through and take out here in a minute. But what we're going to want to do is section off this piece first off, so that way we know exactly what our dimensions are going to be. So I'll just use this as a quick rough estimate. So naturally you'd want that to be a shelf, and then these are going to be your cut spots. We'll want to make our cuts pretty close up to this part right here, so that way we don't have this curve unless you want that. It's all about aesthetic. This is where it's a freedom of expression and how you want it to look in the end. If you want to maintain more of a rustic look, or if you want to have more of a geometric look to it, cut a little bit closer. If you want to have a little bit more of a rustic, like this is a pallet, this was made from a pallet, one thing you can do is just kind of make your cut a bit farther out and leave this. You can sand off, or you can leave the logos too. Depends on how rustic you want to make it, and it also depends on how modern or chic kind of look you want to make it as well. Printing and stamps on the pallets is a bit more of a sought after thing somewhat, so if you wanted to, you can just do a light sanding around the emblems, and then you can go through and clear coat it, or you can just do like a mineral oil, depending all on price point, what you're selling it for, as well as what you want your final look to be. So on here we have nail holes as well. That can also be another aesthetic. A few people enjoy making the cuts nice and fresh, or just like very geometric, but then they'll leave the nail holes exposed facing outward. So this is all interpretation, and like I said, I'll make a couple of renditions of it and we'll see. I'm not quite sure exactly which ones will sell good in my area, so that is also for me to be able to see, and I can give updates later on that too. So for the vertical pieces, I'm going to leave a few of these boards a bit more on the rustic side of things, and you'll have the varying lengths, and I'll kind of play around with what I want the width to be. So we want to do this in more of a simple process, because I can go through and I can rip these down with the table saw, and I can make every single cut and miter, make it look as though this was store-bought lumber all day long. That's not the difficult part or the fun part. You can always do that. You can always just run down to Home Depot, make a quick purchase, go home and start building. That's not the fun challenge in my book. So it all depends on how rustic you want to go. So as you can see here, we have a few more dark toned lumber, and then we have a lot more light lumber. And this could have all been the same pallet. These were on the bottom, these were on the top. So we'll go through and kind of either just play with switching them around a bit. We can leave some of the rough cuts if we want. We can make them straight. Like I said, this is all interpretation. If you want more of a rustic look, leave the rough cuts. If you went off the same method that I had in my other video, just using a circular saw, making quick work of it, you can leave that rusticness. This is one of the projects that actually welcomes that. In fact, a few of these, if the cut's too straight on it, like this one here, you might actually think about going through and roughing it up or aging it a bit more to get that kind of feel and appeal of it. So if you do end up staining this, I will advise a mild sanding, just enough to get some of this kind of dirt and dust off of it. Hit it with an air compressor, brush it down, whatever you need to do, because otherwise you're going to have a lot harder time applying and getting your applicator, whether it be even just paper towel is one thing I use a lot, because then I can just throw it away afterwards. Otherwise, if you use a rag or a couple of different things, you have a lot higher chance of getting all the dirt and debris off of this wood into your stain. And then that stain is forever now just going to be used on junk material, because otherwise if you try to use that again on a nice, more refined project, you're going to have this unknown to you grit that you're either going to visibly see or you won't see, and then it'll actually damage a lot of veneer and a lot of different things on it. So fair warning, done it. That's why I'm advising you against it. So anyway, moving along. What you want to check is your width. So for me, I think I'm going to be going off of the basis or idea of 4 of these across. That seems to be just kind of what would be a good centralized shelf. So the beauty of that is I have the option now, because of its width, to leave this angle if I want it. Otherwise I can still refine it and just offset it. So that way this will help hold these 3 boards, and I can do the same for doing like a little 2 tack up here, because then that'll be 2 boards tacked together. And I can kind of stagger and go off of that basis to where you have a larger platform on bottom, and then I'll probably go off of 3 of these, or you can just do 2 depending on the height and what you want to have as a price point. I suggest making about 2 to 3 sizes so that way people have options. You don't want to give too many options, because then you'll get phone calls or text messages all day long wanting this variant or this change up, which is fine to an extent. But if you give way too many options to people, they'll feel intimidated and they won't necessarily feel the need or desire to purchase it. So just as a quick tip and advice, you kind of want to refrain from that. So once you have everything lined up, you got some rough estimates and ideas of where you want things to line up. And like I said, if you want it to be more cut straight, but then leaving those little kind of wings in the back here, you could still go off of that same basis. So I'm going to try to get this to look variable or have variance to it, and I'll make a few cuts on it. And I'll make one up real quick off of the same kind of basis. These back pieces here, you can also turn on their sides if you don't mind it looking a little more thick and chunky from the wall. And you can use these top and bottom to help hold all 4 of the boards together. You're not wasting any offcut, and you're getting your shelves out of it, and you're not having to try to utilize a table saw if you don't have one, or another method to get this a little thinner. So we'll go off of the first one being a bit more on the rustic side, quick and easy. You can even go through and remove the nails out of the pallet and then reuse them on the project. At that point, you're kind of weighing pros and cons. You're not going to be out any money financially for materials or for any kind of hardware, but you're wasting a great deal of your own personal time. So it begs the question, what is your time worth to you? Is this a project that if you do want to go through and make a little extra money and have a little extra funds throughout the summertime to help with bills, if there's something you're wanting to look at for your kid's birthday or any kind of family or relative is needing some kind of any emergency funds or anything like that, these are something you can go through, put them up for sale, make a little extra money, helps throughout the summertime, especially if you're putting kids through any kind of fun extracurricular activities. D, all the above. So if you have more time, feel free to reuse the material that you're given as the nails and everything else to add more to the rustic appeal. But if you have, sitting out in your shop or shed like I do, lots of pin nails and you have lots of wood glue, that'll probably be the basis of what I do a lot of. And that's just because I have the material readily available, the purchase has already been made, and at this point it still is cheaper for me versus my time to go through that method. Because then I can crank these out pretty quickly and still keep a good quality standard and have it to where people really like it. If I leave it blank or rustic, they can go through and do a paint on it, they can do a wash on it, they can just clear coat it, or they can just hang it on the wall and be happy. So that's kind of the bracket you want to shoot for if you can. So without further ado, I'll make a few cuts, do a layout on it, Like I said, this is all up to interpretation. I'm not going to give any dimensions. You can go in and out, move it around. Certain pallets are going to be different than others. That's the beauty of this kind of project. It's a make it up as you go. No need for any exact dimensions. So I'll make a few cuts and then we'll continue on. Alright, so the general idea here is to cause things that fascinate. That's the beauty and appeal of the rustic theme so far. So pretty much what you're kind of shooting for is a few different characteristics here. So we have some staggeredness, but they're all going to have like kind of a little bit off, so it's not uniform. Another thing that's another facet or fascinator is that this kind of has a bit of a stair step to it, but then abruptly drops. So it adds kind of a little bit like your eyes want to trail up but then kind of fall down. So this just is meant to be an overall interesting piece. And it is definitely meant to be a conversation starter. I feel overall pretty much all of the country modern or country chic is meant to be conversation pieces. As is most furniture in your house if you think about it. So I wanted to have this logo up. But I still like this crack here in the wood. We have this interesting knot pattern here. So the idea is we're trying to create fascinators here and leaving it a little bit more rustic. So kind of playing up a bit of the feel and appeal. So between the two sides, I didn't quite get off the blue chalk. That's alright, it'll wipe off, especially when I go to stain. So between the top and the bottom, I'm going to go over here so this longer bit is on this side, and this I made just kind of a rough cut to be pretty much close to what this is. So I'll go down a little bit, kind of feel where it looks good. Kind of go like that, play around with it a little bit. None of this is meant to be exact. So this is all 100% what you want it to be and what you feel it looks good as. And from this angle it's kind of odd. But once I stand it up, you can kind of get a bit more of an idea behind it. So like I said, this is stuff for figurines, candles, other country western or just rustic looking items that you want for decorum or a picture frame. So kind of play around with that a bit to where you're able to have good proportions and still have it look good. And kind of try to maintain the rule of thirds to some extent, but this is also meant to be random, meant to look thrown together, and meant to look very I did just rip this off the barn and it just spoke to me kind of art piece. So we will go through, mount up these boards in place. What I'll also do is just use some stringer bits or leftover chunks and put that on the back so this kind of sticks out the wall a little bit more. We're trying to shoot for a chunky kind of appeal for the furniture. So if it sticks off the wall, or decor, if it sticks off the wall a little bit, that's perfectly fine. What we can also use is just another slat. So if you didn't want to use something that makes it extra thick and chunky from the wall, and you don't like that look, then you can also just shoot for another piece of pallet wood that just goes top and bottom. Super simple, nothing super crazy. And like I said, I'll probably just use wood glue and pin nails to hold this together, because once the glue sits, I could just go through and glue it and clamp it as well. The pin nails are just so I can have it ready and ready to look good and have it ready to use while the glue is still drying within the 24-hour window. And also it gives me the ability to show this as content before it is actually truly set. So we'll go through and do that next. So there you have it. Quick run through on how to build a little kind of a pallet wood shelf or a rustic western kind of shelf. A few of the other things that you can do that I would suggest, depending on your stylization or desire for it, is to carefully get an old rusty piece of barbed wire, very carefully like I said before. You can lightly sand the edges of it, let it rust a little bit outside, and then hit it with a clear coat so that way you're not handling or moving around rust or having it rub on your wall. And you can attach 2 eyelets to the top and then have that string across the top. Now if you sand the tips of the barbed wire, you can actually effectively knock down anything that would actually cause damage or pain to anyone if they were to grab it improperly or quickly. But that's one of the ideas or styles and aesthetics. I'm not quite going to go for that. Otherwise, just standard mounting hardware in the back is good. A few different people will actually say what you can do if you yourself are going to keep it, or you want to sell it this way too, is to make, out of the pallet wood as well, a French cleat, which is just basically 2 45-degree angles cut in the top and then opposing each other. One mounts to your wall with the cleat kind of facing outward, and then the other one with it facing inward. They just meet. So you can make that kind of system set up using the actual board running off the back if you want to be a little extra crafty with it. That actually does make it really easy too, because once you perfectly make level the part of the French cleat on the wall, when you slide this on top of it, it'll actually be perfectly level as well. So then that way you don't have to worry about any sway, and a French cleat can have a great deal of strength. So that'd be one selling point if you wanted to go the extra mile and get the most bang for your buck. And it'd be super simple if you had a table saw. Just run through, make 2 miters on 2 of the pieces, mount them up on the back, you're good to go. You can even, like I did with these in my last video, is just take a single plank of pallet wood, cut it in half, make your 45-degree cut so it's a little bit shorter, mount one on top, do the same thing so you're using the same amount of material. All material used for this was a single stringer, so just one of these guys. So you have your bottom and then each of your sides going up the top, and just 5 pieces of pallet wood. So you very effectively could do 1 pallet and make multiple of these, depending on how good the pallet is and how many pieces of material you were able to get from it. And you can also cut down the width. So if you were to cut down the width and the length on this, you could effectively use 1 board, make a cut down the center of it, and then have multiple small versions of this shelf. And then you can even get away with shrinking your bottom dimension and your top dimension to where these are a little bit closer, and shrinking your width on it. You can just downsize this whole thing a bit and still keep with it. There's a couple ways you can go even further with it too if you wanted to. Kind of destroys the aesthetic would be as if you were to rip these in half if you're really having a hard time getting pallets. My uncle lives in Hawaii, and he does a lot of things with anything he can get on there, because on the island it's hard to come by wood. So he actually does a lot of projects with pallets, and just any leftover cutoffs or anything on any job sites or anything, he'll use those, because there's just, it's a scarce, hard commodity, is because they can't grow their own trees to be cut down in Hawaii, so you have to just kind of scrounge and get what you can, or you have to try to ship off of the mainland any large chunks of wood, which is kind of just absolutely highway robbery for pricing, because, well, they got to boat it in or fly it in, and either way, it's not cheap to have a 12-foot length of walnut or any other kind of material shipped to you, so you just use what's around you. So that's where, in those circumstances, you could rip these in half for display, make numerous amounts of these, and they would probably sell really good down there if you were to be in an area that was harder to get wood, as a side note. So that is all it is. It's a lot simpler of a project than I had anticipated, and it went together very quickly. Like I said in the beginning of the video, you can go through and use screws. If you want to go super, like I want this to be structural, if you want to cut costs a little bit, you can do what I did, which was wood glue and pin nails. So the pin nails help hold the structure together. They add a little bit of strength, and then you have the wood glue that will be more than strong enough to hold up anything you can put on this. So you could probably rock climb off of it if you did the glue job properly and made these joints really tight. That being said, you can also go through and utilize the nails that come off of the pallet as well. They're very structural. They're what held it together in the first place, so you can always just reuse these. And the process is pretty simple. So hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well if you're not subscribed yet. We are climbing closer and closer. We just breached 900 subscribers, which is fantastic. It is amazing. And we are that much closer to the stretch goal of 1,000 subscribers for hopeful monetization and moving down the road to getting a bit more money towards the shop. So far the wood shop has actually paid for itself, but we're hoping to continue to actually have it become profitable. So once you have all of your expenses paid for everything that you put into the shop, then you can actually, anything past that point is technically gain. Now it is technical gain until then, but if you look at it in the finance area, that's what we're kind of shooting for a bit. So just to kind of keep moving forward, and it's a fun pastime for me. I really love this, and I'd love the channel to take off. This would be a dream come true. This is something I really enjoy doing, so hopefully we can keep moving towards that. If you haven't as well, I forgot to say, hit that notification bell. That way if you enjoy the content, you'll know each and every time that I pump out another video and hopefully some more helpful content. This has been, like I said, a bit more of a tutorial video. I was hoping to kind of crank out a few more of those. I have a few more projects for summer coming up, and I know a lot of us are looking around for an extra project or two for extra income. And like I said, pallets are readily available, relatively cheap to work with, nothing too much to them, and I try to do this a little bit more on a rudimentary level so that way anybody can kind of get in on making these projects. They're meant to be fun. Knowledge is not a dictatorship, but I'm here to hopefully bring you some good content that you will enjoy, and hopefully good information that will help further you in your endeavors in your future. So let me know in the comments if you have any ideas or approaches or things that you might do a little differently. Like I said, there's a lot of interpretation here, so feel free. And thank you very much. Have yourself a good one.